Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our Genetics and Cancer. My name is Kathy Chern and I am a Consumer Health Librarian at East Brunswick Public Library. Today's program is brought to you by Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey, the Center for Asian Health at St. Barnabas Medical Center, and the library's Just for the Health of It initiative to promote community health and wellness. Our speaker today is Daniel Pearson, Community Cancer Control Specialist at Rutgers Cancer Institute. Please be aware that this talk is being recorded. Please keep your microphones muted and your webcams off. The recording will be available at ebpl.org/YouTube. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. The speaker will answer questions at the end of the talk. The speaker presenting will not be able to offer medical advice to attendees during this program. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to Daniel.
Thank you, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Controlling Your Cancer Risk. My name is Daniel Pearson. I'm part of the Community Outreach and Engagement team at Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey, as well as part of this Screen NJ program, which is a Department of Health funded, which aims to improve access to lung and colorectal cancer screenings in New Jersey. The Community Outreach and Engagement team at the Cancer Institute, we wear many hats, but our main goal is to reduce the cancer burden in underserved populations across New Jersey, as well as increase preventive cancer screening rates in New Jersey. And one of the ways we do that is through our community education program, which Controlling Your Cancer Risk is a part of. So today we'll be learning a ton of information. We have a few different, general topics to cover, as well as some information towards the end about genetic testing and risk assessment, but we'll also learn a little about the differences between hereditary and sporadic risk factors for cancer, which we'll identify as our two kind of main categories for cancer risk. We'll also learn how cells mutate and initiate cancer growth, and we will understand gene function as it relates to cancer. Now, before we begin, I do have a few pre-test questions that I'd like to ask. All of these questions are true and false. So the answer key should be popping up on your screen right now. So there's 4 questions. We'll go through them one by one, but if you could just please answer the questions as we move along. It's very helpful to evaluate in the programs. So the first question, true or false? You will always get cancer if you carry a cancer-linked gene mutation. True or false? Question number 2, also true or false? You can pass along a cancer-linked gene mutation even if you don't personally develop cancer. Number 3, you can make lifestyle changes to reduce your personal cancer risk. True or false? And the final question, age is one of the greatest risk factors for cancer. True or false? I'll give everyone just one more minute to answer these questions before we end the poll. All right, we will end it in 5 seconds. Awesome. So let's start today's discussion by identifying the types of risk factors that we'll be covering for the next 30, 35 minutes or so. So what is a risk factor? A risk factor is anything that increases your chance of getting a disease. In today's case, we'll be talking about risk factors for cancer. We'll be separating those risk factors into 2 main categories, which, as you see on the slide here, are hereditary and sporadic. So to start, hereditary risk factors are passed down to you from your biological parents. And hereditary cancer is linked to inherited gene mutations, which have been scientifically proven to be related to the development of certain cancers. And now it's commonly thought that cancer, quote unquote, runs in the family. And while this may be the case, only about 5 to 10% of cancer cases are actually hereditary in nature. Sporadic risk factors develop over the course of a person's life. These can be anything from lifestyle habits, exposure to certain chemicals or radiation, or the natural aging process. And as we'll discuss later on, age can be considered one of the greatest risk factors for cancer. Cancer, like many other diseases, is a genetic disease. And the word genetic is often misused when we reference, illness or disease. So here we're going to be using the word genetic to refer to the gene itself, which when altered can cause abnormal cell function as well as abnormal cell growth. And this uncontrolled abnormal cell growth is what leads to the formation of cancerous cells in tissue. We've already mentioned that cancer is primarily a disease of aging, and this is because it generally takes a while for mutations to lead to cancer. As we age, it becomes extremely important to stay up to date on healthcare appointments, especially cancer screenings, since many cancers can be prevented or detected early as a result of screenings, blood work, or even routine physicals. Now, before we do a deep dive into cancer risk assessment, I just want to do a little mini science lesson. I promise it won't be too much to handle. Just a brief refresher on genetics of the body and how it works. So every person is made up of around 37 trillion cells, and as we might recall from a high school science class way back in the day, right? A person's genetic material is located within chromosomes in the cell's nucleus or the cell's center. You see that right in the middle of the slide there. A genetically healthy cell includes 46 total chromosomes, with a pair of 23 being inherited from each of our biological parents. DNA, which is considered our genetic instruction manual, is located within these 46 chromosomes. And as we see in the image on this slide, human genes are located within DNA. And most of the over 20,000 human genes are exactly the same in every person. However, some do vary. Only less than 1% of all of those total genes are variant from person to person. But these are the genes that make us different, in many different ways, right? In personality, appearance, but most importantly for today's presentation, the difference in disease risk from person to person. To summarize, the gene can be considered the basic physical and functional unit of heredity. And as we've mentioned, each person inherits one copy of each gene from their biological parents. They're especially, and we're talking about genes, they're especially important for producing proteins, which carry out vital tasks for our bodies, which can be anything from preventing tumors from forming or killing off damaged cells in the body. And a good way to think of genes are as notes on a sheet of music. So if we all started off, let's consider as the same person or the same song, we can change individual notes or sections of the music to create an alternate tempo or an alternate scale. This is why family members often have similar genetic makeups, why siblings or cousins might look similar to one another, as well as why some diseases seem to run in a family. So here we have a diagram which shows how cancer might be passed down in a family. Since genes are passed down from our parents, who also each have two sets of genes, we theoretically have a chance of inheriting 2 of 4 versions of a given gene. So we can take a quick look at this graphic on this slide here, just to kind of better understand the concept of heredity before we move forward. So we'll start at the top here. The male at the top of this diagram on the left-hand side had a genetically linked cancer. This means that all offspring and their offspring theoretically have a chance of inheriting the gene that causes cancer. Now, it's also possible that offspring and relatives will inherit the cancer-causing gene, but not actually get cancer themselves. And if we're staying on the left side of this diagram, now the second generation of people actually display that pattern of having the gene but not developing cancer. And now, despite neither parent having cancer, the children of those people received the gene and could also develop cancer. And this is just a reason why it's very important to understand family history of cancer as well as other chronic disease. Just because your parents, your grandparents, or your siblings might not have had a disease, there's a chance that a gene that's linked to that disease could be present in your family line. We'll talk a little bit about those genetic mutations that make us differ from person to person. Again, just less than 1% of all genes differ from person to person. So a mutation is a change or changes to a person's DNA, generally due to a gene level issue caused by an error during cell division, a viral infection, or chemical and radiation exposure. Although the word mutation usually has a negative connotation, not all genetic mutations are detrimental. They may actually be beneficial, such as being a very fast runner, having a photographic memory, or they can just cause little to no effect on a person at all. So genetic mutations carry over when cells divide and copy. Now, just like humans, bodily cells have reproductive and life cycles, with cell death sometimes being predetermined or pre-programmed. That's a process called apoptosis, when a cell is programmed for death once it's damaged. And when cells are age or are damaged, new cells will eventually take their place. So because certain genes control the process of healthy and regulated cell division, when one of those genes is damaged or mutated, it leads to the uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells. And these are the genes that oftentimes are linked to cancer in general or certain types of cancers. So the uncontrolled cell division that we've mentioned a few times is how cancer forms. Because abnormal cancer cells are capable of more rapid growth and division, they're able to overtake what's called their cellular environment, or the area around them and the tissue, and turn that healthy tissue into unhealthy tissue. So this diagram here shows an example of normal cell division leading to cell death. That's on the top, and then beneath that is the process of a cancer cell multiplying at a faster rate and eventually forming a cancerous mass of cells or a tumor. So tumors have the ability to affect and alter healthy cells in their proximity, as we just mentioned, or we called it a cellular environment. So in this diagram on this slide, we see the uniform nature of the healthy cells, both on the left and the right-hand side. They all kind of look the same in size, shape, stature. And then in the middle, where that tumor has grown, we notice the difference in size and shape, the irregularity of the borders of the unhealthy cancer cells. Now, because tumors grow at such a fast rate compared to the healthy cells around them, their genetic makeup is also subject to constant change. Tumors can detach from the original tumor, such as we see here towards the bottom. We have that single little tumor cell, which is, separated from the main tumor. And this is a process known as metastasis when it comes to cancer. So there are, this is one of the features of an advanced cancer. And when your cancer has metastasized, as they call it, it becomes much more difficult to treat than one that's detected early. And this is mainly because, the cancer can utilize the bloodstream to spread to other areas of the body. For instance, if you have a colon cancer, it could, travel through the bloodstream and spread to your lungs. And then a tumor can also form on your lungs as well. So, multi-site cancers stemming from a late diagnosis on an early, for a cancer that, could have been detected early through screening. So now that we have a better grasp of how and why cells mutate, we can get back into the discussion of risk factors for cancer and what we can do to manage or prevent them. Earlier, we talked about the difference between the two types of risk factors, which were hereditary and sporadic. So just as a quick refresher, hereditary risk factors are passed down from your biological parents, while sporadic risk factors develop over the course of a person's life. And again, these can be anything from lifestyle habits, exposure to chemicals or radiation, or just the natural aging process. Some of the most common sporadic risk factors for cancer are also considered risk factors for, your overall general health. So these factors include smoking, being overweight or obese, a sedentary lifestyle with little or no physical activity, a poor diet, or alcohol use. And now oftentimes it's believed that cancer might run in a person's family, but as we've established, only about 5 to 10% of cancers are actually hereditary in nature. In most cases, the cancer itself isn't related to hereditary genetic mutations, but rather a shared or common lifestyle and behavioral factor, such as the ones that we see on this slide. So just as an example, let's say food insecurity ran, through generations of a family over an extended period of time. This food insecurity may lead to poor dietary habits. It could lead to obesity or being, overweight. So this could heighten a family's risk for specific diseases from generation to generation because they have similar environmental surroundings, similar diets and lifestyles. So this is an interesting graphic that displays the percent of cancer cases in adults over 30 that are directly related to each of these sporadic risk factors. So as we see, tobacco use clearly the number one most related sporadic risk factor for cancer. Almost 20% of cancer cases for those over 30 are attributed to cigarette smoking or tobacco use. Similarly, personal cancer risk can increase if multiple risk factors are present in a person. So for example, if a person smokes cigarettes, drinks alcohol, is obese, and does not exercise, they might have a higher overall cancer risk than if they were only to drink alcohol. Now, the good thing is that we can actually change the way we behave to reduce or manage our personal cancer risk. Perpetual practice of unhealthy risk factors can result in what is known as an epigenetic change. So we're going to differentiate here a little bit between epigenetic and a genetic change. So rather than a gene being mutated and its, pure structure, we can think of an epigenetic change as kind of a post-it note that's left as an instruction for a gene when the body expresses it. So what happens when we leave a post-it note? We finish the task, we remove it, we crumple it into a ball, we throw it in the trash. But since these changes are reversible, you most likely will not pass these gene modifications down to your children. And like I said, the good thing about these types of changes is that they're potentially reversible through, changing certain behavioral risk factors or sporadic risk factors that are attributed to these changes. So briefly, I just wanted to, discuss some resources that are available in New Jersey that can assist in improving for unhealthy behavioral risk factors. So for fitness, the YMCAs are always a great resource. Many of them turned to virtual programming during the coronavirus, but some of them have actually opened their doors, and gyms have hit a certain capacity threshold, so they've reopened for programming there. YouTube was great during the lockdown, and I think a lot of people have actually turned to home workouts, instead of going back to the gyms for the meantime. There are so many fitness experts have channels on YouTube, and you'll be able to find essentially any style of exercise that might be right. So if you're into yoga, there's plenty of that. If you're into high intensity training, they also have that. And there's just a ton of stuff you can do and a wealth of knowledge out there to learn from. So YouTube is definitely a great spot to find credentialed, fitness experts. Now for tobacco cessation, we have Tobacco Free for a Healthy New Jersey, which has 11 quit centers located across the state. Tobacco Free for a Healthy New Jersey, they link you up with a trained tobacco cessation specialist to help create a personalized quit plan. Now, similarly, the New Jersey Quit Line is a free program dedicated to help New Jersey residents quit using tobacco products. So their website includes resources and tools to support your decision to quit. And they also offer English and Spanish quit coaches, and interpreters for additional language can be arranged if necessary. Importantly, they also offer assistance for vaping and e-cigarette cessation. Now for diet and nutrition, NJ SNAP Ed, which is a part of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is a nutrition and physical activity program aimed at teaching New Jersey residents how to make healthy, budget-friendly food choices and lead more active lives. They also provide educational resources that can be accessed on their website, and they also do workshops similar to the one that you're attending today. Now, despite all of those behavioral risk factors that we just talked about, tobacco, alcohol, poor diet, low exercise, cancer itself is predominantly a disease of aging, meaning that your likelihood of developing cancer increases as you get older. So in the United States, about 87% of all cancer cases occur after the age of 50. And this is because cancer generally requires an accumulation of factors that occur over a person's lifespan. And as we age, we accumulate exposure to sporadic and environmental factors, which may act on their own or couple with, hereditary factors such as those gene mutations that'll eventually lead to cancer. Just to visualize this, in the red square there is the 50 to 54 age range. So this is from the CDC. It is their US cancer statistics data. So they've bracketed it into 5-year age groups on cancer incidence rates per 100,000 people. And we could see, we said 87% of cancers occur after the age of 50. And you can see the dramatic incline, kind of from that area moving forward as we get older in cancer incidence. And here we have the median age of diagnosis for the 4 most common cancer sites in the United States. So breast has a lower median age than the rest of these cancers for a couple reasons. Many breast cancers are hereditary in nature, which will occur at earlier ages. And they also have a very good screening program and publicized screening program for breast cancer, which has been more successful than screening for, prostate, colon, and rectum cancer, and especially for lung cancer. So a lot of times breast cancer will be caught, at an earlier stage than the other 3. So let's get into our, brief discussion about hereditary cancers. So these cancers, just as we just mentioned with certain breast cancers, are diagnosed at an unusually young age. So this is a telltale sign a lot of times that your cancer might be linked to an inherited gene mutation if you develop it early in life. Other potential traits of hereditary cancers include multiple cancer types in one person, as well as unusual cases of cancer. There are some hereditary syndromes that have very serious effects on genes that would normally, prevent the formation of tumors or the formation of cancer, which leads to many instances of uncontrolled cell growth, as well as, uncontrolled cell division, and it can also lead to cancers at a young age, and as well for those rare cancers. Now, there's also evidence that some cancers affect specific racial or ethnic populations more than others. So this could be because of, shared environmental exposures or regional diets that occurred over extended periods of time. And as we know, hereditary cancers make up the minority of cancer cases, only about 5 to 10%. But there's still a possibility that if a type of cancer runs in your family, there may be an associated gene mutation that is being passed down, to offspring. So just to use an example, we'll briefly discuss how the BRCA1 gene increases a person's risk for certain types of cancer. So BRCA1 is commonly referred to as the breast cancer gene. A healthy BRCA1 gene is responsible for repairing damaged DNA as well as suppressing tumor formation in cells. So when this gene is damaged or mutated, it's actually heavily linked to hereditary breast cancers as well as triple negative breast cancers, which are notoriously difficult to treat. So before age 80, roughly 72% of women with a BRCA1 mutation will develop breast cancer, while 44 will develop ovarian cancer. There's also an unrelated gene known as BRCA2 or breast cancer 2 that has similar effects on a person's hereditary cancer risk. So here we see the effects of a BRCA gene mutation on breast cancer risk. So women with an inherited mutation are over 7 times as likely to develop breast cancer during their lives. And similarly, we see that women who carry the same mutation are over 25 times as likely to develop ovarian cancer, which in general is not one of the, highest incidence rates for cancers. But if you do carry a BRCA mutation, you will have a very increased um, chance for developing an ovarian cancer. So it's important here to notice also that just because a gene might affect your chance for one cancer, that doesn't mean that it's strictly limited to that. It could also have effects with other cancers, and we'll talk a little bit about that a couple slides down as well. So when considering hereditary disease, it's important to remember that we receive one copy of each gene from both of our parents. So this means that genes do not discriminate by gender identification, meaning, a mother can pass a damaged gene to a son and a father can pass a damaged gene to his daughter. Oftentimes, and in the case of the BRCA gene that we just talked about, a damaged gene is linked to heightened cancer risk in both men and women. So men who carry the BRCA mutation are actually more susceptible to prostate, pancreatic, and male breast cancer. So just because it's called the breast cancer gene doesn't mean it's just limited to, that type of cancer or specifically to women. All this information just highlights the importance of knowing and understanding your personal cancer risk. So where possible, it's always recommended to try and find out any relevant medical history from your family members. as well as, make sure you share as much information that you get with your healthcare team. And there's even a possibility that, your personal cancer screening recommendation might change based on personal or family medical history, especially if it's known that you have an inherited gene mutation in your family. So for an example of how screening recommendations might change depending on your personal cancer risk, we can use the American Cancer Society's most recent breast cancer screening recommendations. And these are from 2015. So we'll start with the average risk on the top. A woman is considered to be at average risk if she doesn't have a personal history of breast cancer or a strong family history of breast cancer, and she also does not have a genetic mutation known to increase risk of breast cancer. It's recommended that average risk patients begin annual mammograms at age 40. Now, for moving to the high risk category, a woman would be considered high risk for breast cancer if she has a cancer-linked gene mutation or a first-degree relative has this gene mutation, such as the BRCA1 gene that we just talked about, or if the woman has received radiation treatment to the chest area before age 30. For high-risk patients, the American Cancer Society recommends not only an annual mammogram, but also a breast MRI, and that these screenings begin at age 30 rather than age 40. So you see the difference between, being average risk, you're going to start at age 40, your screening with just a mammogram, while if you're high risk, you're going to have, two different types of screening, and you're going to be starting your mammograms at age 30 rather than 40. I always like to talk a little bit about one of the great screening resources that we have under the New Jersey Department of Health that might be able to assist underserved residents in need of cancer screening because, our team at Community Outreach and Engagement, we focus on health disparities and addressing those in New Jersey as well as reaching underserved communities. So this program is called New Jersey Cancer Education and Early Detection, or NJCED. And they provide comprehensive screening services for 4 types of cancers. That'll be breast, cervical, prostate, and colorectal cancers. So NJ-SEED services include education, outreach, early detection, case management, screening, tracking, and follow-up. And it's actually known that all 4 of the cancers that NJ-SEED provides screening for can be treated more effectively when detected early. The one caveat here, in order to utilize NJ-SEED services, a person must be at or below 250% of the federal poverty level and must be underinsured or uninsured. NJ-SEED operates at least one program in all 21 counties in New Jersey. So just to wrap things up, let's discuss how this knowledge that we've learned so far today can affect cancer prevention, outcomes, and treatment. So one potential service we have available, it's called genetic testing. Genetic testing refers to the processes and techniques used to determine details about a person's DNA, which reveals important familial health or personal health information, as well as a person's potential disease risk. So as we've just seen, there are cases where a person is at an extremely heightened risk of cancer due to hereditary causes. And we just want to talk about a few different types of genetic testing that are available. If any, pique your interest, you can let me know and I can give you some more information about that following the presentation offline. So predictive testing is done before symptoms are present, and this determines a person's disease risk if a family member has a known genetic disorder. Diagnostic tests confirm or rule out genetic disorders. So these tests assist a person and their healthcare team in determining a management or care plan for a person. Pharmacogenic testing gives the healthcare provider an idea on how to best treat a patient, as well as avoid side effects in treatment, almost to see how someone would respond to a treatment. Reproductive tests can be done before, during, or after pregnancy. These are used preventatively to find out if a person, if the parents carry any genetic variants that their child might inherit. And then finally, direct-to-consumer testing, which has become very popular over the last few years. These are the tests that are completed at home and sent in to a company such as 23andMe. Oftentimes they also give you your genealogy as well. So here we have an example of a gene testing panel. So this is just like an informational sheet on what a specific type of genetic test would look like. So this example here is for hereditary breast cancer. So in the left-hand column, we see the genes that might be associated with a hereditary breast cancer. Notice at the top, the two familiar ones that we talked about, the BRCA1 or the breast cancer 1 gene, as well as breast cancer 2 below it. And then in the right-hand column, we have the associated risk with a gene mutation. So you can notice the difference between a BRCA1 versus BRCA2 mutation. The associated risk for female breast cancer changes a little bit, but then also notice, like we mentioned, the increased risk for ovarian cancer, as well as prostate, male breast cancer, pancreatic cancer in there as well. And these are generally available, on any of the testing companies' websites. They'll give you options. They run complete panels, which are just testing for, the most linked cancer genes. Another one's called P53 or tumor protein 53 that is, largely linked to many cancer cases. And you can see that one here towards the middle as well. So another option we have here to use the information that we've gathered is genetic counseling. So genetic counselors are healthcare providers who have specialized knowledge in the field of genetics, as well as in the fields of counseling and support. So they can specialize in many different healthcare fields, including prenatal health, pediatrics, cardiovascular health, neurology, or important for today, oncology. So they're really helpful in sorting out resources regarding inherited conditions that might affect a patient or their family members, information about, further tests or what the next steps in the genetic risk assessment process might look like. And they can also provide, as a counselor, psychological support, including shared decision-making or adapting to, the newfound knowledge of a certain condition or a heightened disease risk for a person. So I also wanted to include some really helpful resources regarding genetic testing and genetic counseling. So the first one on the top, the Life Center at Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey, is designed for individuals who are concerned about their risks to develop cancer based on family history. Now I've included the phone number and the email address here, and these will also be included in a resource guide that's sent out to all the participants today that I've made up for everyone. So you don't have to take a picture of this because it will be sent out to you. But the first consultation at the Life Center is free of charge. And, this is located in New Brunswick, but they moved to, virtual platforms as well. And genetic counselors from this program also see clients at partner sites in Princeton, Hamilton, Somerset, and in Long Branch. So, they're expanding their reach a little bit to see patients in person. Now, also, I wanted to include the National Cancer Institute and the American Cancer Society because they have some really great resource pages that are dedicated, not only to genetic testing, but to genetic counseling, risk assessment. And they really cover the whole spectrum of it. And, there's just a ton of awesome information on both of those websites. They're also included on the resource page that I'll send out as well. So before we take questions, I just real quick want to ask some post-test evaluation questions. So again, all of these questions are true or false. Okay, so number one, you will always get cancer if you carry a cancer-linked gene mutation. That's true or false. Second question, true or false? You can pass along a cancer-linked mutation even if you don't personally develop cancer yourself. True or false? The third statement, you can make lifestyle changes to reduce your personal cancer risk. True or false? And the fourth and final statement, age is one of the greatest risk factors for cancer. True or false? Give everyone a few more seconds to answer. All right. So real quick, we'll just go over the answers. Number one, you will always get cancer if you carry a cancer-linked gene mutation. That is false. We talked about that in the family tree slide where, a person with cancer passed down that gene the children didn't get cancer, but the grandchildren who inherited the gene did. Similarly, you can pass along a cancer-linked mutation even if you don't develop cancer. That is true. Number 3, you can make lifestyle changes to reduce your cancer risk. That is also true. And 4th, age is one of the greatest risk factors for cancer. That is true. 87% of cancers occur after the age of 50. And we saw that slide where, the cancer incidence goes up. And this is because you require, many compounding risk factors to develop cancer. So I'll open for questions. So what if you're tested and you have a lot of mutations? How do you follow up? Is there anything you can do? Yes. So if you're tested and, if you're testing, let's say if you go to a genetic testing service or a genetic counselor to do the testing, they will be the ones to share the results with you and you'll have a little bit more of a personalized experience. But if you're tested and if you do testing on your own, if you do testing on your own, you can follow up with a genetic counselor or just see your physician and kind of understand what the next best steps would be for you. And because they'll obviously clarify what diseases or cancers you might be most at risk for depending on the genetic mutations. Do you know if FAP skips generations? So FAP is familial adenomatous polyposis. That is one of those rare kind of diseases that I talked about earlier that are genetic in nature that might cause cancer at a really early age. A lot of times these are linked to colorectal cancers. So the genes here do not skip generations, but it's the way they're expressed. So just like we mentioned that, you have the potential to inherit 2 of 4 genes, there's a chance that you might not inherit the gene. So yes, it can skip generations, but the opportunity for it is always there to pass from generation to generation. Why are only damaged normal cells sent for apoptosis? Why doesn't the body know that cancer cells are bad and send them for apoptosis? So that's a really great question. So technically speaking, right, all cells are at one time normal cells, right? So the cells aren't damaged to begin with. So the body, the concept of apoptosis is to prevent cancer from developing. So when damaged cells are able to, form, and then remember that's the slide we had with the tumor where it was kind of just, or the one before that where the unhealthy cells were rapidly growing and dividing. The apoptosis, the role of that is to nip it in the butt, so to say. So one of those genes that might be, mutated, like we can call it P53, which is it's the most important tumor suppressor related to cancer. If that gene's mutated, it's not able to stop cells from dividing, which is the concept behind the tumor. So does that answer your question? If not, you could say no, and I can go a little bit more into it. Okay, so once the gene is totally damaged in cells, the apoptosis effect will no longer work, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is if that gene's role as a tumor suppressor is to, flush out the damaged cells or, kill off the damaged cells before they become cancer, they're not able to recognize that they're bad anymore because they've lost the function within the gene. It's kind of a deep dive science lesson into that, which I'm not truthfully qualified to give, but that's the crux of it, is that they're no longer, once the genes are damaged to a point, they're no longer able to, carry out their function, which is an automatic cell death of damaged cells or damaged DNA specifically. So if we don't have any more questions, if anyone could please, if you have your cell phones out. So we have an evaluation form for all of our workshops at the Cancer Institute just to see, how we're doing, if we're conveying the right information to everyone or, ways that we can improve our information. So feel free to scan this QR code that I have on the screen here with your phone's camera, and it should just bring you directly to a little post-test survey. It's only about 5 questions, but it's very helpful to us in evaluating our programs moving forward. And it gives you an option, if you'd like a little more information, you can add that in there as well, and we can get back to you with it. But thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kathy, and the Brunswick Public Library, as well as the Center for Asian Health and St. Barnabas Medical Center for the great series they put together. I hope you enjoyed not only this presentation, but the other presentations of the series as well.
And thank you, Daniel, for taking the time to present and also to answer all of our questions. And then also thank you for all of you for attending and for attending this entire series. So yeah, thank you for everything and take care and stay safe.